So, we reach the end of the book. The pandemic breaks, the deaths start to fall. It appears that the serum is working. Um, you know, I will just vaccines, right? Good things, right? Um, and what we see is that Rieux's belief in science, in the discipline of medicine, in his commitment to treating an illness, no matter um, where it's from, and treating people, no matter who they are, um, is, I think, an excellent example of responsibility in the Sartrean sense, right? That, Rieux exists, and therefore he can be judged, right? His purpose is follows the existence that he has chosen of becoming a doctor, right? At this point in time, he has his calling. He is doing the thing that he feels that he has been called to do. Does he is he only doing it because, right, he's been told that, as a medical professional, you must do X, Y, Z? Certainly it doesn't appear to be that way, right? I think that, he is fully capable and with his free will making that decision every single day. We don't see him as a jovial character, for sure. We see him as a very duty bound character, along with some of the other characters, like Grand and Tarot, which I will, right, point out. We haven't really talked about that in these videos, because I do want you to have a couple, right, to do on your own. So, what do we take away from Rieux and the end of this particular book when we find out, surprise, he's the one who's been writing it? Of course he has, right? That makes sense, right? It makes absolute sense that he's been writing this and that he's been the one sort of providing the observations and writing about the way that this works. Rieux is not unscathed at the end, right? He has watched a lot of people die. The young child, he's watched Panelu die. He watches Tarot die, and loses many people, right? Which is incredibly traumatic, right? And what we see is that he does not. He's not ignorant of those feelings and of the reaction to the world, but he simply continues on, right? He soldiers on and goes forward and deals with despair, and definitely experiences it in a very real way. And I think when we look at Rieux, it's important to put ourselves, I suppose, not certainly in a pandemic, even though many of us have been in one, right, at this point in time, and sort of share that experience, right? But of putting ourselves in the position of looking at life and seeing, how are we dealing with the lives that we have, right? Certainly not a call to like, oh, you should examine your own life and change. But when we look at it from an existentialist viewpoint, I think this book gives us the opportunity to sort of evaluate others, right, from that viewpoint, right? We haven't talked much, nor will we really, about how any of these characters exhibit existentialist traits on their own, because I think that's beside the point at this point, right? I don't think we necessarily need to do that. I think what we're looking at more is how we view the book through the lens of existentialism. But how do we view our own lives, right, through the lens of existentialism, right? As we are doing things, right, this book gives us an opportunity to see that life continues, and when life continues, we see our decisions magnified, right? Rieux sees every decision that he makes magnified because he is responsible for his actions, and his actions affect many other people. I think it's easy for us in our modern world, especially as sort of isolated as we are surrounded by lots of people. Technology, however, gets in between us and other people a lot, I believe, right? We don't feel as connected with other people as maybe we used to. Maybe you disagree with that, in which case, I'd love to hear, right, and see in your discussion boards, right, how you evaluate that. But I think it's easier to see ourselves as isolated from others, that our decisions don't necessarily affect that many other people, right? But it is worth considering, right? When we do anything, who does it affect, right? I think often about ordering things on Amazon, or ordering things via, Uber Eats, or via, any other sort of carry-out takeout app, and getting an Uber to get to the airport, right? Those decisions affect people, right? People have to drive things to my house to drop them off, right? People have to deliver food to my house if I decide to order it. People have to come and pick me up if I order an Uber to go somewhere, right? And we may think of ourselves as, right, well, this is part of, right, the economy. This is part of who we are, right? If we order things and an Amazon driver gets a chance to, continue working and make money, right? But we may consider, right, are the decisions that we then are making, how do we judge ourselves for those things, right? Rieux, right, we see him hands-on in the plague, dealing with death in a very implacable sort of manner, right? He appears to be fairly stoic about the entire thing, and to be making decisions, yes, via his own free will, but also sort of removing his visible despair, right, from the situation. Is there despair in Rieux that he is not writing about? Good question. Is he a reliable narrator? I think we have to ask that question, right? Anybody who's writing about themselves may be, as Sartre would point out, right, making the best decisions that they can, to present themselves possibly in the best light that they can, right? And I'm certainly not saying we disbelieve that Rieux is, a good person or a good doctor. But again, right, when we look at him, when we look at his decisions, how is it that we believe and sort of understand his situation? So what I'd like to do for this very last video is I want to talk about what we are going to be going into, right, for next week, right? Next week is week 5. We are going to start looking at 2 very, very important things. We're going to be looking at Dada, and we're going to be looking at Camus, right? We're going to be starting to look a little bit at the absurd, right? Absurdism, which is related to, but not exactly what existentialism is, right? There are some very notable differences and very helpful things that sort of allow us to place the two together, right? There's a reason why we do a lot of these, why we link them a lot. But there's also Dada, and Dada is linked to a more surrealist sort of idea, but also has a very important cultural tie-in, I believe, for us as people looking at this era of European history, right? Dada is going to predate much of what goes on with Sartre and Camus by many years, right? But will provide us with the tools that we kind of need, in a way, to see where we got to, right, the existentialist movement, and where we got to some of the absurdism, and maybe give us a better idea of why the absurd feels both familiar in a way, but also a little bit removed from what Camus' idea of it is. So we'll talk about that in just a moment.